Nobody in the courtroom that day was prepared for the chilling silence that fell, thick and suffocating, after the daughter-in-law spoke. What began as a seemingly mundane family dispute over a trivial sum of money rapidly descended into a psychological battleground, exposing a decades-old deception so profound it threatened to shatter not just a family, but an entire legacy built on lies. Judge Judy, sharp and unyielding, watched closely as the meticulously constructed facade of a respected woman began to crack, piece by agonizing piece, under the weight of her own daughter-in-law's quiet, devastating testimony. This wasn't just about justice. This was about a truth that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to the surface in the most public and unforgiving arena imaginable. The case of Hayes versus Vance. On the surface, it appeared to be another common squabble on Judge Judy's docket, a daughter-in-law, Clara Hayes, suing her mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, for what Clara claimed was an unpaid loan of $8,000. Eleanor Vance, a woman in her late 60s with an air of refined elegance and a perfectly coiffed silver bob, sat opposite her daughter-in-law, her posture ramrod straight, a picture of indignant innocence. Clara, younger, with a nervous energy that seemed barely contained, avoided eye contact, clutching a worn leather handbag. From the very first moments, Judge Judy sensed an undercurrent, a tension that went far beyond a simple debt. Eleanor Vance, in her opening statements, dismissed Clara's claim with a wave of her hand, describing it as a misunderstanding from a confused young woman. Her voice, smooth and practiced, hinted at years of social maneuvering, a woman accustomed to controlling narratives. She implied Clara was opportunistic, perhaps even delusional, attempting to extort money from her. Judge Judy, however, wasn't easily swayed by polished veneers. She'd seen enough performances in her court to spot the subtle tells. Eleanor's eyes, while seemingly calm, darted almost imperceptibly towards Clara during her dismissive remarks. A flicker of something, not anger, but perhaps a fleeting moment of apprehension, crossed Eleanor's face before she quickly reasserted her composure. This small detail did not escape the judge. "Ms. Hayes," Judge Judy's voice cut through the burgeoning tension. "State your case clearly. Why is Ms. Vance obligated to pay you this $8,000? Clara, visibly swallowing hard, began to recount a story of how she had lent Eleanor money for an urgent investment opportunity that promised high returns. The loan was made through a series of bank transfers and a signed promissory note, which Clara now presented as evidence. It was all very neat, very ordinary, yet the air in the courtroom felt anything but. Judge Judy examined the documents, her brow furrowed slightly. The note was indeed signed by Eleanor, but it lacked the specific terms one might expect for a formal loan between non-family members. It was surprisingly vague. "Ms. Vance," Judge Judy turned to the mother-in-law, her gaze like a laser. "Is this your signature?" Eleanor, without hesitation, confirmed it was. "Yes, Your Honor. It was a gesture of goodwill, a small sum to help my daughter-in-law, who was struggling financially at the time. I never expected her to twist it into a formal debt." Her tone was laced with a patronizing pity that grated on the nerves. The courtroom's murmurs grew louder. It seemed like a classic case of family financial drama, a misunderstanding exacerbated by strained relationships. The jury, a diverse group of 12, shifted in their seats, their faces a mix of confusion and mild disinterest. They'd likely seen similar cases of familial conflict before. But then, Judge Judy noticed something. As Eleanor spoke, Clara's grip on her handbag tightened, her knuckles white. Her eyes, which had been downcast, flickered up to meet Eleanor's for a fraction of a second, filled with an intensity that spoke volumes. It was not the look of a confused young woman. It was the look of someone holding a detonator. "Ms. Hayes," Judge Judy redirected her attention, her voice now carrying a sharper edge. "You claim this was for an investment opportunity. What kind of investment was this? Did Ms. Vance ever provide you with details?" Clara hesitated, glancing at Eleanor, who met her gaze with a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. The tension in the room was palpable, shifting from the usual courtroom hum to an almost unnerving stillness. It was the kind of pause that screamed, "Something is about to break." "Your Honor," Clara began, her voice a little shaky. The investment was unusual. She said it was a highly confidential venture, something that required absolute discretion. She insisted on a cash transfer to a private account, claiming it was crucial to avoid red tape. Eleanor scoffed loudly, a theatrical sigh escaping her lips. "Your Honor, this is preposterous. I merely offered to assist Clara with some financial planning, given her lack of experience. There was no secret investment. She's fabricating a story to justify her demand." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Vance, you signed a promissory note for $8,000. Why would you sign such a document if it was merely financial planning assistance?" Her voice was slow, deliberate, each word a hammer blow. Eleanor's composure faltered for a moment. Her perfect smile twitched. "It was a formality," Clara insisted. "She's quite particular about paperwork." She chuckled, a forced, brittle sound that did little to lighten the mood. The jury exchanged uneasy glances. This explanation felt thin, too convenient. But that wasn't even the worst part. Clara, taking a deep breath, finally lifted her head, her gaze locking onto Eleanor's. "Your Honor," she said, her voice now steadier, clearer, "the $8,000 wasn't for an investment for me. It was for her. She needed it to pay off someone who was threatening to expose her past. A past she has meticulously hidden for decades." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor Vance's face, which moments before had been a mask of disdain, turned ashen. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a stark, terrifying pallor. Her eyes widened, a raw, naked panic flashing within them. Every single person in that courtroom, from the bailiffs to the gallery, suddenly leaned forward, their attention now utterly rapt. This was no longer about $8,000. This was about something infinitely darker, something that had been simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Judge Judy, observing Eleanor's dramatic shift, knew Clara had just struck a nerve, and a deep one. The air crackled with an unspoken dread. What kind of past? The question hung heavy, unspoken, in the suddenly suffocating quiet. "Ms. Hayes," Judge Judy's voice was low, dangerous. "Are you alleging blackmail? And if so, what exactly was being blackmailed?" Her eyes bored into Eleanor, but her question was directed squarely at Clara, signaling she would tolerate no more vague allusions. The psychological pressure in the room escalated instantly, focusing on the woman who had just dropped a bombshell. Clara, though still trembling, seemed to gather strength from Eleanor's visible terror. "Your Honor, I'm alleging that my mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, built her entire reputation and considerable wealth on a foundation of fraud and deception decades ago. And this $8,000 was just a small payment to keep that truth buried. She claimed it was an urgent matter, that old ghosts were resurfacing." Clara paused, letting the words sink in, watching Eleanor's every shuddering breath. "I only found out because I was helping her sort through old family papers after my father-in-law passed. I stumbled upon something she never meant anyone to see." Eleanor, finally finding her voice, let out a strangled cry. "Lies. All lies. This is an outrageous fabrication, Your Honor. My daughter-in-law is clearly unstable, trying to ruin my good name." Her voice was shrill, no longer the smooth, practiced tone from before. The mask had slipped, revealing raw desperation. The sudden, uncontrolled outburst only served to cement Clara's claims in the minds of those watching. Eleanor's sophisticated facade had shattered, giving way to a frantic, cornered animal. The jury exchanged meaningful glances, a shift in their collective perception almost visible. "Ms. Vance," Judge Judy interjected, her voice icy, "your behavior does not help your case. If these are lies, you will have your opportunity to refute them, calmly. But right now, Ms. Hayes is testifying. Proceed, Ms. Hayes." What exactly did you find? The courtroom hung on every word, every gesture. The truth, long buried, was fighting its way to the surface, and Judge Judy was meticulously prying it out. Clara took another deep breath, her gaze firmly on Judge Judy, avoiding the now glaring Eleanor. I found a series of letters, Your Honor. They were hidden behind a false back in an old desk my father-in-law used to keep. Letters from a woman named Sarah Miller. And old newspaper clippings. Clara reached into her handbag, pulling out a thick manila envelope. These letters, from the late 1980s, detail a sophisticated financial scheme. A fraudulent investment company that promised incredible returns but vanished overnight, leaving hundreds of people destitute. And the newspaper clippings? They reported on the scandal and the suicide of a junior partner who was scapegoated for the entire collapse. The entire courtroom fell silent. A collective, horrified intake of breath was the only sound. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a true crime unfolding in real time. The scale of the alleged deception, the mention of suicide, it all painted a picture far darker than anyone had anticipated. Eleanor Vance had frozen, her eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on the manila envelope in Clara's hands as if it contained a venomous snake. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving a sickly gray. And what do these letters and clippings have to do with Ms. Vance? Judge Judy asked, her voice low, but carrying the weight of impending judgment. Her eyes never left Eleanor, watching the older woman's psychological breakdown unfold. Sarah Miller, Clara continued, her voice gaining strength, was my mother-in-law's best friend and business partner at the time. The letters are exchanges between them, discussing the details of the scheme, the plans to transfer funds offshore, how to avoid suspicion. And the junior partner, who took the fall? He was Sarah Miller's fiancé. He was innocent. He became the fall guy while Eleanor, then Eleanor Blackwood, disappeared with the money and reinvented herself, eventually marrying into the Vance family and building her current empire on that illicit fortune. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. The jurors shifted, some leaning forward so intensely they seemed to be holding their breath. The gallery buzzed with hushed, incredulous whispers that were quickly silenced by the bailiffs. Eleanor Vance, usually so composed, so unshakable, now sat rigid, her hands gripping the table's edge so tightly her knuckles were white. Her eyes were fixed on the letters, then on Clara, then back to the letters, a silent, desperate plea for them to disappear. Judge Judy's expression was unreadable, a cold, hard mask of unwavering authority, but the intensity in her gaze told everyone she was seeing through Eleanor's entire life story. Ms. Hayes, you understand the gravity of these accusations? Judge Judy's voice was a low growl. You are alleging that Ms. Vance committed a felony, directly causing financial ruin and contributing to a man's death, and that she has maintained this deception for over 30 years. Yes, Your Honor, Clara affirmed, her voice now remarkably steady. And the $8,000 she needed? It was to silence Sarah Miller, who, after years of silence and struggling with her conscience, was threatening to finally come forward and expose Eleanor. Sarah wanted to clear her fiancé's name, even if it meant bringing down Eleanor. The psychological pressure in the courtroom became almost unbearable. Eleanor Vance, who had managed to maintain an image of impeccable integrity for decades, was now exposed, not by the authorities, but by her own daughter-in-law, in a public forum, over a seemingly minor debt. The irony was devastating. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling. The sheer audacity of the betrayal, the meticulous cover-up, and the chilling implications for her entire family lineage created a profound sense of emotional discomfort among everyone present. Ms. Vance, Judge Judy finally turned to the mother-in-law, her voice devoid of any warmth. Do you have anything to say in response to this testimony? Anything at all? Her gaze was piercing, dissecting. It was a stare that could strip a person bare, leaving no room for pretense or evasion. The entire courtroom held its breath, waiting for a response from the woman whose perfect life had just been violently ripped open. Eleanor, her mouth agape, looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape that simply wasn't there. Her silence was deafening. It spoke volumes, a testimony in itself. The truth was out, and its echo reverberated through every corner of the silent courtroom.